Hey, how on. It's too X-rated for some of you. Okay. Got slides there. See if my clicky works today. Is the physical resurrection of Jesus provable? That's what we're going to talk about this morning. Now, while I remember, we've put two big notice boards up there. Just everyone turn around. See the two big white bits of butcher's paper up there. There's two questions there. One is to do with what you feel God is saying for your generation. And the other one is what are the greatest challenges to being a Christian in your generation. So that's I'd be interested just to see, what's the challenge for you as a Christian in this current cultural moment, at your uni, at your work. What do you think is the hardest, challenging thing that pushes you? And the other side is a bit more prophetic. What do you feel God saying? So I'd love you guys, just as you get a chance, just to jot some things down. I believe there's some pens over there, some texters, and we'll pray around that maybe tomorrow or tonight or the next day. So when you get a chance over lunch or whatever, don't go now. You can get up there and do that. So the big four questions in every human's heart is, how do we get here? What is wrong with the world? And what is the answer? And how will we fix it? So it's a question of creation, the beginnings. How did everyone get down here? Has anyone ever thought that before? Okay, I've grew up in church maybe, and God created the universe, but far out, how does that really work? How did we really get here? It's a big question. What is wrong with the world? Has anyone thought that before? Probably some point where your parent disciplined you when you were 10 years old, and you're like, great, I'm packing my backpack and I'm working. Did anyone ever run away from home and they're like 5 or 10, I'm packing my backpack, and what is wrong with the world? What is wrong with my parents? The injustice. But everyone knows there's something wrong with the world. For the Christian, we believe that's the fall. That's Genesis 3. Sin entered the world. And as sin entered, what does sin do? It separates. So it separated man from God. It separated man from each other. It separated man from himself and knowing himself and understanding the point of being and life. And it separated man from nature or from the earth. So sin causes man to exploit others and exploit the earth and use up all the resources of the world for self. Where with Christ in our hearts and connected back to God, we can take dominion, but we don't need to dominate and slaughter and kill and destroy. What is the answer? Well, today I'm going to talk to you about the Christian answer to this big question, and that's redemption. That's Jesus Christ. Not only his life, where he showed us how to live, not only his death, the cross, which brought us salvation and dealt with the sin issue, but today we're going to focus on the resurrection and how that is a provable historical fact that Jesus Christ physically actually came back to life. And how will we fix it? This is the question of restoration, and Christians believe that through the power of Jesus Christ that we restore the world by bringing Christian teaching, principles, and that way of living into every tribe, tongue, nation. That has brought about great missionary movements. The greatest missionary movement ever was in the 19th century, where mainly Western Protestant missionaries went out to the four corners of the globe. They brought Christianity to India. They brought Christianity to Africa. They brought Christianity to America. They brought Christianity all over the world. A lot of that came from England. And then eventually, as America was established, a lot of Christian Protestant missionaries from America. And why? Because this belief that Christianity is best for all people, whether it's a distant tribe in South America, or whether it's India and some village in India. Christians now for centuries, especially since the Protestant Reformation, have given their lives. The English Protestant missionaries in the 19th century would pack all of their clothes and belongings into a coffin, to a wooden coffin. So they would pack their clothes in there, and they would take their coffin with them, and they would get on a boat, and they would go as a missionary of God into Africa or another nation to live and to die for the purpose of the kingdom, because they believed that the best way to restore life, marriage, nations was the message of Jesus Christ and the principles of God. The world offers many redemptive solutions. So we're going to talk about redemption today. Everyone say redemption. The world offers its own, because every worldview it's not a worldview unless it can answer the questions of creation, evil, redemption, and restoration. So the proper worldviews, the well thought through, or so-called well thought through worldviews, offer a solution to redemption. So naturalism, in that worldview, offers the salvation through autonomy, or salvation and redemption through self. So self-pleasure, sexual liberation, subjective truth, the individual's right, Zachary Swamborough, to choose whatever he believes his truth is, whatever he wants to do with his life. That is the way to redemption. Just let people be free. Don't put sexual rules on them. Don't put political things on them. Make sure he's not poor and he's got lots of money to spend. Make sure he can say whatever he wants and do whatever he wants. And so that is salvation or redemption, the naturalistic way. And what religion has the right to tell you that you should live a certain way. In this worldview, no religion has that right, because underpinning this religion is an atheistic evolutionary understanding of the world, which results, as you can see in the next column there, in this belief that after death, or the reality of death, there is nothing. You die and go into nothingness. The interesting thing, and why I put that column there about what these worldviews believe about the afterlife, is because every ideology or every worldview has to deal with death. You can't not deal with death. The question of what happens after you die is essential. It's essential. And this is what phenomenally, I mean, this is miraculous when you really think about it. Incredibly, the Christian worldview, or the Christian truth, is totally built on this idea of life after death, or of the resurrection of the dead. It's at the center of what you believe. You believe in the resurrection of the dead. The day you became a Christian, you said, I believe in Jesus Christ. Is that right? And you invited him to your heart. In that moment, you said, I believe that he rose from the dead, and therefore people can rise from the dead. And therefore, even when I die, I will only sleep and I'll be risen again in heaven, live for all eternity. That is a huge distinction from every other worldview out there. Islam, interestingly, offers the closest, what I would consider to be the closest to Christianity explanation of the world, because it does have a God, and it does have a heaven and a hell, and it does have many things that line up with Christianity. But what's the redemptive solution? Well, in Islam, it's working. It's hard, it's works, it's religion, it's pure religion. So you honor the 5 pillars of Islam, which is the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca. It's the Ramadan with the fasting. It's the 5 times praying a day, and there's a couple of other pillars. And you honor those and you do those, and when you do those things, you're doing good things. And when you're not following the Islamic teaching and these pillars, you're doing bad things. And then one day you're going to die, and what will happen is God will weigh the good and the bad. And if you've done more good, you'll go to heaven. If you've done more bad, you'll go to hell. So it's a pretty anxiety-provoking kind of redemption system, because it requires you to do a lot of hard work every day. Hinduism, it offers a meditation that ends with a transcendence of consciousness, the body, and this earth, this normal human, ucky, yucky people stuff down here, the body, sex, money, all these things are disgusting and evil and decaying. But in Hinduism, through meditation and other practices, you can transcend all of these earthly things. And if you transcend it enough, and you meditate enough, and you empty your mind enough, then eventually you will vaporize into nothingness. And this is called nirvana. This is what happens once you die. If you transcend this earthly realm, you become nothing and enter nirvana, which is nothingness. So where Christianity wants to fill your mind with the truth, these kind of religions like Hinduism and Buddhism want to empty your mind. Where Christianity wants you to learn the secrets of wealth creation and of marriage and of raising children, the focus of these religions is not to engage in worldly things, but to focus on emptying your heart, emptying your mind, so that you can become nothing. The New Age, and this is the big thing that you'll battle in your generation. You heard it straight away today, didn't you? Brad, Matt with his friend, Eden. I don't think you mentioned it, Eden, but she was telling me last night when we got home about her friend that does Reiki, and he's had all these spiritual... Oh, there you are. Sorry, so small you disappear sometimes. It's like, Eden, where are you? Eden. No, she's just there. And she's had all these spiritual... Or is it a he or a she? A he. Great. And he's had all these spiritual experiences through Reiki. He's seen angels and seen miracles, and he's had all this stuff the same as Eden through Jesus. So where's the difference? But all of this stuff is this New Age type worldview. And the New Age worldview is what you're going to come across all the time, because your generation is kind of rejecting where your parents' generation kind of said all the spiritual stuff is stupid and we're just going to be scientific and academic and educated, and spirituality is weird. They rejected the church, and with that they rejected spirituality. But what's happening with your generation is it's coming back and it's going, hang on a sec, science and mathematics and books isn't enough. Like, what about the spiritual side of things? What about my heart? What about what's going on the inside? What about angels and demons? And is there something out there? What are all your movies? They're all superheroes, and they're all horror movies about ghosts and spiritual things, or they're all movies about extraterrestrial travel and supernatural things and spiritual dimensions. That's what floods movies that young people watch. Superhero movies were the most watched movies in 2018. Why? Because we're sick of the overbearing reality of science and mathematics and books and education. We know in our hearts that there's something more than just the physical things. But the New Age offers you spirituality without responsibility. It offers you meditation without having to obey any kind of standard. So people are going to look at you and go, that's cool, you're a Christian. So you do the prayer thing, the worship thing, you talk to Jesus in your heart. I do that. I do Reiki, I meditate, I do yoga, I hear voices. And so you're just the same. But the thing is, you actually follow a standard that leads to life, and it impacts every part of you. Where the New Age ideology, what it does is you just pick and choose from this guru and that, the Dalai Lama said this, that was cool. You know, some gay transgender person I follow on Instagram said this, and I like that quote. And so you just pick and choose and make up your own spiritual religion. So it's kind of this Eastern religion meshed with this kind of Western idea. Oh, don't worry, you have spirituality, but you still chase money. You still climb the power hierarchy in your workplace. You know, you still go out and have all the sexual exploits you want. It's the spiritual bit that kind of itches that scratch, but scratches that itch even. But then it's the all the Western stuff. You still get your big TVs and your comfy holidays, and you don't do the spiritual and become a monk and have nothing. You have everything, but you have your spirituality. So it's this new age kind of modern meshed in thing. And that's going to be a challenge for you guys, because you're going to say, Jesus healed me. And they're going to say, that's awesome. I got healed at Reiki. And you're going to say, God spoke to my heart. It was incredible. He is real. And they're going to say, yeah, I have voices speaking to me and they help direct my path. And I get signs all the time of what I should do. And you're going to be like, it just all sounds the same. What's different about me following Jesus? Unfortunately, New Age, as Matt was saying, it really offers nothing. You kind of die and you re-enter the universal kind of mother. You go back into nature and the cycle keeps going on. So it's really like, it does not stand well with reality. Atheism offers us, and neo-Marxism, they kind of offer us this political socialist system where there's no classes, there's equality for all, and it's this picture of utopia. It's kind of like we're going to build the Tower of Babel. If everyone would just not be too religious and not be too political and not argue, we can just get all human beings in a room together and we can build cities and we can share all the money around and everyone will be equal and everyone can be whatever gender they want and have sex with whoever they want and live however they want. But if we all just help everyone get what they want, then we will have utopia. We don't need God because we're building Babel unto ourselves. We're smart enough. If we just have a bit more science and a bit more technology, we can heal everyone. So the human race becomes God. And with this kind of socialist idea that everyone's a good person, it's religion that creates problem. Everyone's a good person. It's the politicians and the people in power and the heterosexual white male that has created all the problems. If we get rid of all the oppressors that are trying to tell us what to do and how to live our lives, that was the whole same-sex marriage debate. It's like, stop oppressing us. Homosexuals are equal to everyone else. Stop telling us how to live our lives. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't care who you have sex with. I don't care how you have sex. Why would you even think that I care about that? I've never given 1 second of thought to caring what you do in your bedroom. Do you really think I'm bothered by that? Or that I want to tell you how to have sex or who to have sex with? I couldn't care less. But don't tell me how to raise my children. And don't tell me what to preach in my church. And don't tell me that a man and a man marrying one another and raising a family is best for babies and best for children. Don't bring all your stuff and tell me what I have to believe using this kind of, well, you've victimized me and you've oppressed me sexually, and it's like, I don't care about any of that. So which is true? Which redemption option is best for human flourishing, for your friends, for your family? What's best for your children you're going to have one day? How are you going to raise them? Well, for the Christian, the answer to the world's problems and the solution is Jesus Christ. When I grew up in the church, who grew up in the church? Grew up going to church, most of you, inbred Christian young people. Who was cool and got saved? Yeah. No, it's good. You should be happy you grew up in the church. I'm incredibly privileged to have grown up in a safe, healthy environment, have incredibly stable childhood because of Jesus Christ, and very, 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 very privileged. So when you grow up in the church, I got to the age at 16, 17, as you would have heard before, where I really committed my life to Jesus properly, outside of my parents, and really made my own decision to follow him. But my Christian walk was completely faith, 100% faith. I believed what my parents said, I believed what my pastor said, I believed what the Bible said. I had no underpinning personal evidence or explanation or reason for the hope that I had. Zilch, zero, nothing. And I experienced a lot of anxiety because of that. I'd go into my soccer club or to my unsaved friends. I'd go and play with the kids up the road. We used to go every night after school. I used to go up the court about 3 houses up from me, and I used to go and play with the kids there. There was a whole bunch of kids, and that's how I became good at sport. because we would play cricket and gridiron and 40-40 and baseball and every sport under the sun we would play every night, footy all the time. But I didn't know how to explain who I was or what I believed, and it created a lot of anxiety. And because of my personality, I was a little bit more of an introvert. It caused me to kind of, draw back. I didn't want to enter conversations. I didn't want to get into things about a life and sex and relationships and stuff, because I knew I didn't want to do it the world's way, but I had no idea why I was really doing it my way, apart from because Jesus told me so. But thank God for his grace, because that didn't lead me out of the church. It didn't lead me away from Jesus. It didn't create an offense in my heart towards God. It actually led me the other way, thank goodness, where I said, well, this is pretty stupid if I believe in something but I don't know why. So I spent most of my early 20s asking why. Everything. I turned over every stone. Why do we come to church and sing 3 worship songs at the beginning? Why does someone preach every Sunday? Why do we have a youth group? Why can't I have sex before marriage? Why does God want to rule and reign in my life and I can't just do what I want to do and then still go to heaven? Everything had to be overturned. And then I got into this kind of rhythm and momentum and everything. I never criticized. Well, I probably did a little bit. I was young and prideful and arrogant, like none of you here, but I probably did a little bit. But I genuinely in my heart of hearts, I did want to know why. It was a good motive. Probably didn't come out well at times, but it was a good motive. I had to know. And it kind of became this insatiable desire. I have to know everything. Even down to, why do we worship at the start of a church service? If there's not a reason for it, then why do we do it? And then when Zoe and I entered into courtship, we did the same thing. Well, why is courtship like this? And I often say this to people. Brad was very good at asking why during courtship, wasn't he, Madeline? Why? Why do we do this? Why do we not get physically involved at the start? Why do we have a court and ask people to speak into our lives? If you don't know why, then your courtship will fail. Because you'll just be trying to perform to get a wife or a husband. You have to know why. It has to be. And if you don't ask why, how can you get a revelation? You'll never get a revelation from heaven if your heart isn't open to God to learn. And your heart won't be open to learn if you don't actually think about your life and think about your faith and think about where you spend your time and think about why you do what you do. If you just do what you do because you should, or because your mates are doing it, or because a group of us come down from Swan Hill because we go to that church and we're kind of expected to come to engage, then this will not be sustainable. You're already in trouble. You have to know individually, this is why I do it. And it's got to be a reason that's eternal. It's got to be a reason that's built on Jesus Christ, not built on a pastor or a parent or a friend. It's to be built on something more powerful than that and deeper than that. And as I began to ask these questions, I started to realize these things. Well, Christianity actually diagnoses the human dilemma best. It actually tells us what's wrong with the world the best. It actually, through believing Jesus and following him, I get why my mind works the way that it does. I get why my motives always are first of all for me and for self-protection and for self-benefit. I understand. Secondly, it explains sin. It explains sin, but it explains how to deal with sin. Have you heard that before? Substitutionary atonement? Sorry, that's a big one. So substitutionary atonement means that, let's imagine that Zach is Jesus for a moment, and I'm playing basketball, and I'm in the game. I'm in the game of life, bouncing around, doing dunks and rejecting people and stuff like that. But then I can't deal with sin. How do I deal with sin? My rotten insides here, my filthy rags. How do I come before God, who's perfect? Well, I've got to substitute Jesus in. So Jesus substitutes into the game and he plays on my behalf. And he substitutes in and he can deal with sin. He's not dunking, he's dying on a cross. Yeah, good acting. So there needed to be an atoning for my life, but I couldn't do it. So Jesus substitutes in as my atonement and he becomes the sacrifice, and he dies on the cross as me. Jesus died on the cross as Caitlin Bannon, as Bonnie Tyus. He was up there as you, not only for you, but as you. He substituted into your cross. He died on. That makes sense. How could a human being, how could Marxism or atheism deal with this problem that's a universal, eternal problem of people are evil? Well, of course, it makes total sense. Only a God could deal with that. Only God himself, who is perfect, the righteous for the unrighteous, could come down to earth and deal with the scourge of sin. That makes total sense. No one is strong enough. No one is a superhero enough. No one is a powerful general Roman warrior. None of them were strong enough. The Jews and their temples and their religion and their laws and all of that, none of that was good enough. None of it was good enough. Of course it needed a God to do it. The grace of God made him the judge who was just. And then salvation, I began to realize, is actually a historical truth. It's not just a Christian thing I learnt in Sunday school. It actually stands up in the face of the unsaved, in the face of science, in the face of research, in the face of the person of Jesus, the place that he lived, the time that he died. It all makes sense. The essential distinctives of Christianity is the resurrection. In Acts 2 verse 30, this is the first time that Jesus' resurrection is mentioned after he has ascended to heaven. But he was a prophet. This is Peter speaking on the day of Pentecost. Jesus was a prophet and knew that God had promised him on oath that he would place one of his descendants on his throne. He's talking about David. David, one of his descendants being Christ, would be placed on the throne. Seeing what was to come, he spoke of the resurrection of the Messiah, that he was not abandoned to the realm of the dead. Atheism offers us the realm of the dead, but no life after death. Every ism offers death, but it offers no eternity. It offers no life beyond the grave. Who's not abandoned to the realm of the dead, nor did his body see decay. Why? Because you'll be risen again and you'll be given a new body. You'll still have the same body, but it'll be new, it'll be eternal, it'll be fully restored. And God has raised this Jesus to life. Silly, it's stupid, it's blind faith. It's exactly what the world tells you it is. You don't believe in the Easter Bunny and Santa, but you believe in Jesus. That's dumb. And that's exactly what it is if there's no resurrection of the dead and if he didn't come back to life again. Verse 15, more than that, were then found to be false. Any man can die on a cross, and many men did, and go to the grave and die. That's happened before. How can we say that this Jesus, this Jewish man who lived 2,000 years ago, who got crucified by the Romans, and they crucified a lot of people, how can we just pull this one man out who just got put in a tomb afterwards and was dead? How can we pull him out and say he was the Son of God? Well, you can't. It's silly, it's futile, unless he came back to life. Because if he's just a Jewish man that died on a cross 2,000 years ago, then sin has not been dealt with. It's not enough evidence. It's not beyond reasonable doubt. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, you still in your sins, then those also who have fallen asleep in Christ are lost. And if only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are of all people most to be pitied. So Christians are the most dumbest people and the stupidest people, and should be pitied the most if Jesus didn't rise from the dead. But Christ indeed has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead also comes through a man. For as in Adam all died, so in Christ all are made alive. Not only alive in your spirit, but alive for all of eternity in heaven. Not only born again in the inside, but born again to live for all eternity in heaven. The famous scripture, Romans 10:9, on salvation. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and believe in your heart that he raised him from the dead, you will be saved. We miss that sometimes, don't we? Confess with our mouth, believe in our heart. Got it, I'm a Christian. Well, what you're believing in your heart, though, specifically, is that he came back to life. That's what you believe. Is that verified in your mind? Is that verified in your understanding? Do you have evidence that that could stand up in a court of law, this belief in Jesus coming back from the dead? The Bible is convinced on the resurrection. But can the authors of the Bible be trusted? The people who told these stories, can they be trusted? Can Christian history be trusted? Was the Bible handed down correctly over the last 2,000 years, or did people add to it? Is the story just a myth about Jesus Christ? Is there reasonable evidence to say that us living 2,000 years later can read our Bible today and trust that that is really what Matthew, Mark, Luke and John witnessed with their own eyes 2,000 years ago? That's another question that you need to be able to answer. Because yes, you might be able to prove Christ, but part of that proving of Christ's resurrection from the dead is you must be able to prove that what was written that gave you the knowledge of Christ's resurrection was actually also trustworthy and not tampered with over 2,000 years. Islam claims that the Bible was once true, but was tampered with over the centuries. Therefore, God sent Muhammad in about the year, 600, 700, 800, around that time, and God gave Muhammad the final revelation that helped, which was the Quran, which helped tie up all the loose ends that the Bible missed out on and the corruption about Jesus Christ and the world. So Islam actually gives us the final authority. Mormonism says that you as a Christian are doing okay, but you've only got 80% of the revelation. It's the Book of Mormon given to their prophet John Smith in about 1850 that gives us the last 20%, that ties up the loose ends about Jesus, because what was told about Jesus was corrupted over time, and Joseph Smith is the final prophet who came and got the final revelation, the final 20%. And that's why Mormonism is the truth. How do you defend your Bible that you read every day? How do you know that what the authors who wrote in there, it is not corrupted? I mean, 2,000 years is a long time. And for the first 1,500 years of that, there's no printing press. There's not many libraries. There's no internet holding all of these things for us. There's no fact checker. Are you a Christian because it works for you or because it is true? If you're a Christian because it works for you or because you grew up in it or something, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to have a crisis in your heart, and you're also going to really struggle to explain it to your friends. But if you're a Christian because it's the truth and you know it's the truth and you have evidence for that truth, then it's going to stand up. It will stand up in any court of law. So is the physical resurrection of Jesus a belief, just merely a belief and an act of faith, or is it an historical fact? That's the question. Is it something you just believe in, or is it a belief but also a historical, a fact? In any court of law, to make a case, you need what? You need evidence. There's two types of evidence in a court of law. There's direct evidence. I saw her do it. So there's the eyewitness account, direct evidence. I saw her, Rose Tahu, with a baseball bat in a dark alley, bash up that poor man. Direct evidence. But is that enough to convict someone? One person seeing something. What's the problem? What's the problem with that evidence? It's her word against mine. I could be telling a big fat story and she can easily get out of that. Doesn't matter if I saw it with my own eyes. It actually doesn't even matter if I videotaped it. if I captured it on my phone, although it's going to make my witness a lot stronger, it's still not enough. It's still not beyond reasonable doubt. Usually people are convicted by the second part of evidence. It's called circumstantial evidence. So it's all the things that surround it. She's already had a history of criminal convictions. When she was interviewed by the police, she gave an alibi that doesn't really stand up. No one could confirm her whereabouts at the time that that witness said, "I saw her." The car that she drives was seen by 15 different people that night in that same street. So none of this is direct, "I saw her hit that man on the head," but it's all circumstances that begin to build a case. Now you're like, oh my goodness, all those hours I spent watching all those detective movies and shows, it's like Christian. It's like I've been studying Jesus and I didn't realize. It's worthwhile. Because if you don't put your detective's hat on and actually take this reasonable approach of investigation, then you'll never understand why you believe as the truth. You've got to shake it. You've got to prod it. You've got to ask why. You've got to push at it. So for any case to be made, we need these strands of proof and evidence, whether it's direct. So you got Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. Direct evidence, I saw Jesus Christ die on the cross, and then I saw him after he rose from the dead. Direct evidence written in the Bible there. Direct eyewitness accounts. But that's not enough. We need other circumstantial evidence to build our case. We assume that Plato, the great philosopher, Aristotle, these guys existed. Now what we read about what they said, have you ever thought, this is a lie? Some dude just wrote this down and said, Aristotle said it. You believe everything you've been told about World War I, World War II. If it's written in a book, if it's documented, we tend to believe that, right? Alexander the Great, you believe he existed as a real person. No one really doubts that, do they? Now, maybe someone like Alexander the Great, you're probably smart enough to go, well, there's probably some myth and legend to the stories, but I believe that he was a real person and he really did stuff and he did take over most of the known world, and you know, his kingdom when he died did get split up and given to his 4 commanders, and I generally believe that. Has anyone done any academic research or studied that at university? Probably not, but you believe it. I was going to say something, but oh, there it is. Okay, I'll mention that later. So evidence is the way that we build a case. Now, the critical thing, if you've watched, who's a bit of, like, be honest with us, who's a little bit of a fan of cold case, detective shows, movies? Yeah. Oh, okay. So I'm talking to you nerds here, okay? What is the key to make a great investigator? When they're studying the evidence, what's the key? Come on, you nerds, you investigator nerds. Brittany. What's that? They see what others don't? Well, that's true. Why do they see what others don't? What is it about them? They're looking, yeah, they're looking, they're asking. What were you going to say, Sam?
They see patterns and connections.
They see patterns and connections, they do. But what allows them to see, what allows them to be good at it, is the fact that they allow the evidence to lead them to the truth. They don't approach with a preconceived idea. So if I'm the lead investigator on this case with Rose, and I don't like the look of Rose, so I'm bent towards trying to fit the crime to the person, that's going to make me a poor investigator. So the evidence doesn't lead me to the truth. I have some bias now. So this is the key with evidence. And the guys like Jim Wallace you saw last night, Lee Strobel, the Case for Christ journalist who came to Jesus, Josh McDowell, who set out to study Christianity to disprove it and then got saved because he realized it does line up if you give it a hard investigation. These kind of guys, they all started out, and the reason they ended up a Christian is because they actually started out with the motive of I'll look at the evidence and allow it to lead me to a conclusion, rather than start with the conclusion of Jesus is real or not real and then try and fit my evidence into that. So this is the key here. And this is a good thing to challenge your friends on, because they all have a preconceived idea of Christianity. And they've probably not looked at a shred of evidence. One of the simplest things you could do if you're a uni student or your friend's a bit of a reader is actually say, have you actually read through the Bible? Have you actually read the New Testament? The greatest selling book of all time. Have you read it? What a simple thing to do. You're telling me this is rubbish. You're telling me it's good for me, but not, it's good for you, but not good for me. Have you ever actually read the basic book about Jesus Christ? So let's look at there's a lot of evidence, but let's look at a few things here. The first eyewitnesses on the tomb being empty were women. I'm getting daggers across the church now. Why is that a piece of evidence? This is a critical piece of evidence, because in this society 2,000 years ago, women were not considered equal with men. A woman's witness or testimony was not even admissible in court. 2 women would have to testify to make up the equivalent of 1 man's testimony in the court of law. If the disciples were pulling a shifty one here, if this was all a plot, the resurrection of Jesus, if this was some idea conceived to make their newfound religion popular, the last person that you would want to be first to the tomb in your story would be a woman, and a bunch of women. It goes against all the culture of the day, how the society worked. So it stands out as quite a strong piece of not only direct evidence, because they saw him, but circumstantial evidence, because why would you ever have women as the key testimony in your case about the resurrection? It makes absolutely no sense if you're inventing a story. Secondly, is the minimal facts concerning the resurrection. And this is always important to start with what actually happened and is widely accepted as true. So the minimal facts are that basically every historian, not just Christian scholars, but atheistic scholars, historians, all say that Jesus died by crucifixion. They all say that Jesus' disciples believed that he rose from the dead. No one argues this minimal fact that all his disciples believed that Jesus Christ was not only real, but died, but rose again. That's pretty clear. Look at the Bible. Everyone believes that. Thirdly, the church persecutor, Paul, was suddenly changed and transformed. That is a verifiable historical fact. The skeptic James, the brother of Jesus, was suddenly changed, and the tomb was empty, and Christianity exploded for the next 3 or 4 centuries from this time when they claimed Jesus rose from the dead. So they're just some minimal facts that are kind of everyone believes. So that gives you another strong strand of evidence that starts to corral this whole thing about Jesus rising from the dead. Thirdly, it's the missing motive. And this is one of the things that Jim Wallace, who I showed you last night, is quite famous for. He talks about the missing motive. The missing motive is why. Why would the disciples talk about Jesus rising from the dead? Now, what usually motivates someone to do a crime? Why did Rose bash that man, that poor man, in a dark alley? There's always a motive. And generally motives come down to 3 things: sex, money, power. Most motives in a crime come down to that. So you crime investigation geeks, is that true? Usually it's about some power, some position, protecting some position, protecting someone, saving face. You know, cheating on my wife, so I killed the woman or murdered the woman I was having an affair with, something like that. It's about position. Sex is often something, jealousy, rage, revenge. My wife was having an affair, so I killed the man. There's some kind of sex, lust type thing involved. And thirdly, money, huge thing. Probably why most crimes are committed. Money, drugs, you stole money from me, I want to make money, whatever. You look at the disciples and Jesus and you get the opposite. They all were martyred for holding on to this story that Jesus rose from the dead. They all underwent intense persecution, whippings and beatings and everything before they were martyred. Is that a great position of power? Is that a nice life that they signed up for? Did that make the story worthwhile? Of course not. Most of them died alone, without a wife, without a partner, and without a friend, and they all died poor. There was no financial benefit in saying that Jesus rose from the dead. All you were doing was signing up to a life of persecution and running for your life until they eventually were all murdered. They were disowned by their families, they were kicked out of their Jewish religion, and they were constantly running for their life from their Roman oppressors. So there's a real big bit of evidence here. There is no motive whatsoever, not even a shred of motive that would say it's worthwhile for these people to perpetuate this story that Jesus rose from the dead. You know, people will die for the truth, and this is probably a fact that every human being would agree. People will die for the truth, but nobody will be martyred for something that they know is a lie. If you know you made a story about Jesus' tomb and rising from the dead and it was going to cost you your life, there is no way known you'd hold that story to the grave without any justification or anyone ever knowing that you're alive. Why would you do that? No human being would go to the grave for a lie. Number 4 leads in quite well. Their willingness to die for what they knew. This is a huge shred of evidence, and it's actually something synonymous with the Christian faith, is this ability to die and give one's life. You only give your life for something if you know that there's an afterlife. Many people will die for what they believe to be true, but no one will die for something that is invented. Stephen died by stoning in Acts chapter 7. James, the disciple of James of Zebedee, died by the sword under Herod. James, Jesus' brother, died. Peter and Paul died at the hands of Nero. They couldn't kill him. They tried to boil John in a pot of boiling water, but he wouldn't die. So they put him on the island of Patmos and excommunicated him until he died on the island of Patmos, but that's where he wrote